Hi, this is Allie from OK to Be Fat, and welcome to a new series called Big Fat Questions, where I answer your big fat questions that you ask me. I gathered these questions from Twitter, Tumblr, Patreon, and so I'm going to answer one today. And if you have a question, you can leave it for me in the comments, and I'll see what I can do to answer it for you. First of all, I'm not a doctor, and my advice is it's the advice of someone who isn't a doctor. I've done a lot of research, but I'm not a advice professional. I don't know what that means, but I'm not one. My basic qualification for answering questions is that people ask me questions. So here, I'll take the first question and let's get started. So today's question is, it's a good one because I didn't actually even pull this from one particular place because I've gotten this question a bunch of times in all kinds of social media, and so let's just go ahead and tackle it now. How do you answer the criticism that fat people use, quote, too much healthcare? Okay, so it's not a difficult question, it's a complicated question in that one of the things that I'm trying to do with the Fat Activism Basics series is give people, build kind of brick by brick a knowledge base for people to be able to say, well, I heard that, but that's not really true, and so here's the information on this, and sort of just gather up this information in a place where it's easy for people to find it. In the last kind of big wave of fat activism in the early 2010s, in the late 2000s, there were people who had blogs and they had gathered up all this information, but a lot of the blog links don't work anymore. So I just want to make sure that when people have questions that they can come find this sort of basics. Why is BMI not a thing? Why are these death statistics? Why are the death? I'm not doing it over. I'm just not. Why are the death statistics wrong? What do we know about how diets don't work? So that if you, for people that are I don't want to hate myself, but I have concerns, I have questions. So for people that are open to it, to kind of look at it and see what they think. And also maybe your cousin says something fatphobic on Facebook and you could just be like, here's a link, and then you don't want to have an argument. So then you can just give someone the information in kind of a prepackaged way. That being said, too much healthcare. Okay, so the people who are putting out this information about the estimated figures, and these are estimated figures of how much fat people cost when it comes to healthcare, or it's usually healthcare, but sometimes there's other metrics or something, but there's other ways that they're oh well, fat people die too soon, but then they cost too much money in healthcare. But you would think if they're dying, then they're not using up any more healthcare. So, okay, not that that's true, but because it isn't. But the arguments are not internally consistent, and so that's part of the problem. But then, so you can go kind of statement by statement and say, okay, so BMI doesn't actually do what we say it does. So it doesn't show that fat people die any sooner, or they have any kind of more excess mortality than thin people do. So we've adjusted for that. So okay, so here's these death statistics. Those statistics are wrong. So you kind of adjust for that building block, and then you say, okay, well, is it even possible for people to lose large amounts of weight and stay, is it possible to make a fat person turn into a thin person? Because if it isn't, then you're sort of, what are you expecting people to do in this situation? So then you have to kind of get into the statistics on 95% of diets will fail, and what are the statistics? Why can't I? Anyway, so that's part of kind of what you can go through, the scientific kind of, here's the proof, and then, but you have to go, because people make these kind of wild statements, and then unpacking the wild statements is a whole chore in itself. So that's possible, and that is not the answer I'm going to give you today, because going through the process of putting together the basis, research-wise and scientifically for something like that it's difficult and it takes a long time. So those are things that I'm gonna tackle in future videos. There's another way that you can kind of look at this, and that's what I wanted to introduce in this answer. So I said all that to say this. The idea that there are people who are too expensive to be alive is not ethical. Okay? So for one, it's not true. But if it was true, so what? Like, what does it mean to say someone is using too much healthcare? Do we want to live in a world where we say that there's entire groups of people who are like too expensive to be alive? In a world where rich people are like hoarding so much money, and we're spending, at least in the United States of America, we spend so much money on war and killing people and in these things that we don't need to be doing. And so if we spent even half of what we're spending on the war machine that we have on healthcare, like, number one, we would still have like the biggest war thing of anyone in the world, because we're already wildly overspending on that in a way that is like really connected to war profiteering and capitalism, and that's like a whole other thing and I can't really get into right now because I don't have time. But we could give healthcare to everybody and it wouldn't matter. So like the framing of the question or the statement that fat people use too much healthcare is like, that's a framing that kind of tells you more about the person saying it than it does about like how you would really refute it yourself. Because okay, so who else uses a lot of healthcare? Athletes get hurt. Marathon runners, I have friends who run marathons, they're constantly hurt. Their knees are hurt, their feet are hurt, they hurt themselves all the time. So if you blow out your knee in a marathon, is that a more ethical overuse of healthcare than the supposed overuse that fat people have? There are no diseases that only fat people get, so just keep that in mind. But so if it's, and you're not required to marathon. Like, it's fine. Like, I don't care. If marathoning's your hobby, like, good. I hope you have fun. But I think that you don't have to do that. So why is it okay for people to do, skateboarding and break their face, and like that's not too much healthcare? But if I try to go to the doctor for anything, then that's like suddenly too much healthcare. So that's part of it. Secondly, it's extremely difficult for fat people to get doctors to actually listen to them. The medical discrimination is extremely, it's vast and it's quite bad. If you can't get a doctor to help you the first time that you go, and you have to go back and you have to go back and you have to go back, is it really your fault that you like weren't able to accomplish healthcare the first time? If you go to if I go to the doctor, and this has happened, I say, my ear hurts, my neck hurts, can you help me? And then they say, oh, you're not credible, you're fine, maybe if you lost some weight, you'd be okay. They give me like they tell me to go take Advil, and then, and 2 days later, I end up with a really bad ear infection. Was it like my fault that happened? Or is it the fault of the doctor who didn't look in my ears when I said my ears hurt? I mean, let's be real. So, too much healthcare is really a question that tells you that the person asking it is either, number one, just trolling for no reason, and if you try to answer them, they're just gonna say something else. Or maybe they're a libertarian, and I don't really know how to say anything to libertarians. Like, if your political analysis is, I shouldn't have to do anything I don't want to do, then like, I don't really know how to help you, because that's not not adult life, so I don't know what to tell you. I mean, I don't want to do a lot of stuff that I end up having to do, so I don't know. I don't really know how to argue with libertarians, so I mostly just don't. You know, at a certain point, it's just like, do you want to have the argument? And what does it accomplish to have the argument? Because my sort of stance on, like, should fat people have healthcare is that my stance is that healthcare is a human right. Fat people are human beings, so therefore fat people have a right to have healthcare at the same rates that thin people do. They currently don't. Fat people are not able to access healthcare, and so actually use less than thin people do. But nobody seems to, like, realize that or put it together or care about it in any way, so that's your answer. It's complicated. But, like, I really think that this is the kind of thing where the person asking me the question is maybe not being entirely forthcoming about why they're, like, framing a question in that way. So, you know, because, like, that's kind of an aggressive and, like, hostile question. So, that's the end of that. And, I'll see you guys again soon and give you another answer to another question. Big fat questions. Thank you.